One would argue that you are a person in the FGC who does not really need any introduction, in my personal opinion.
People would argue that, but then I want them to literally see me 3 years ago and be like, who the fuck is this bitch? And I want everyone to go read the MultiVersus comments. And I want everybody to read through all those comments that are like, who is she? Why is she here? And tell me that I'm very, very famous inside of the fighting game community at large.
Famous inside the fighting game community for a number of different reasons. In addition to being probably the community figure whenever it comes to Skullgirls and everything that Future Club Dev has going on, you are also a former co-host of the Game Devs of Color, and I think you are going to be making an appearance again in 2022, if I recall correctly.
Let's hope.
Fingers crossed. All right. You're also the co-founder of Combo Queens, and also probably the biggest hater of grapplers next to Justin Wong.
I beat Justin in that regard. I'm actually marrying a grappler, so... I completed the storyline. Justin just visited.
I'm just gonna let that sit there. All right.
Love you, Justin!
So once again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and also to give your own perspective on some of the things going on in the fighting game community.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So let's start off with one of the bigger things that you are currently part of. You just recently became an ambassador for a little platform fighter called MultiVersus.
Little, not so little. Multiple versus, singular versus. Like, who can remember these things except for the person that literally got to be featured on one of the very first commentated sets, so...
It's whatever. We're only gonna have like a casual 100K prize pool at Evo this year. It's a small games.
Teeny tiny. No, I'm genuinely very, very excited to be working in any capacity with MultiVersus. Honestly, they had us record the set, and to be very candid, I didn't know if it was going to come out, so I'm very, very, very excited that it did end up being published, that it was ultimately a huge success. And to be very candid with you, I am greatly enjoying the game. I played Melee competitively back in like 2012, 2013.
Oh, wow.
I actually started moving over to Project Melee, and it wasn't until like Nintendo kind of did the no more PM thing that I fell out of love with platform fighters. So when I picked it back up with Nintendo All-Stars Brawl last year, and I didn't really have like that same spark, but it was kind of there. And then I finally got to like actually play MultiVersus. The spark came 100% back, and I was like, I want to play this game. I want to dissect this game. I want to get good at this game. And I haven't felt that since before I played Skullgirls, when I was competing inside of Melee. Even though they're totally different games, it was like that spark is so unique to the reason why I got into gaming. And I remember when it happened with Skullgirls, it wasn't even when I originally picked it up. It was like months after I picked it up. And with this game, it happened immediately. Immediately, I wanted to practice more. Immediately, I wanted to lab stuff up. Immediately, I wanted to figure out exactly what was true and what wasn't inside of the game. And I just don't usually feel that way about games anymore, especially after what happened back in 2020 with Skullgirls. So it was genuinely really refreshing to be able to play this game and to be able to describe and commentate this game in one of the very first public like commentated sets for this game's release.
As fighting game players, we often tend to stick to our own particular subgenre within fighting games. Some of us tend to stick with just 2D fighters. Some of us will stick with the 3D fighters. Why would someone who is more traditionally known for playing traditional 2D fighting games be interested in possibly picking up MultiVersus?
Because they love video games. Because we inside of the fighting game community have started this culture that if you like one type of game, you're going to dislike the other based off other people's experiences, when the reality is ultimately we got into this community because we really, really loved a game. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen again with all of these other games that are out here. What I'm saying is if you have the mentality that you're not going to like the game just because it's not like a traditional 2D team fighting game, then you're not really allowing yourself to be organically yourself, because you're not allowing yourself to explore who you actually are and what your interests are. And I think that's something that the fighting game community could really genuinely grow in.
And do you see that as like an overbearing problem on the FGC, that not only are we like dealing with like a lot of people having a general fixed mindset towards different games and different parts of the genre, but also just like not really being authentic to their own opinions and just kind of piggybacking off of the opinions of more prominent people in the scene?
It's hard because when you're like, you know, a teenager or an early 20 something, you're still trying to figure out who you are. And there are a lot of people like that inside of gaming in general. Like, that's the primary demographic of age group when it comes to people who are exploring games, especially inside of the competitive gaming world. That's genuinely the age that you're looking at, like sometimes anywhere between 16 and very possibly 25, right? That
Right.
age group is not always super developed in the sense of I'm organically know who I am because I was birthed of the womb 16, 17 years ago and I have figured out what my entire life's journey is. No, they're still trying to find themselves. And so what we see is a lot of emulation and a lot of attempting different personality traits and different conversations and even different verbiage just because to see what feels right. Now, inherently, I don't necessarily believe that there's anything wrong with that at its core, right?
Right.
I think the conversation becomes a little bit more nuanced when you start discussing people going through ultimatums of who they are and ultimately saying, well, if I like this thing, there's absolutely no way in the world that I can like this other thing. If I like Street Fighter, there's no way that I can ever play Marvel. If I enjoy Vampire Savior, I can never, ever, 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 ever touch Tekken. That's a fallacy, and that's not fair, and that's something that existed inside of the arcade era of the fighting game community, and I don't feel like that's something that we should bring into this next generation, specifically the online generation of the FGC. I really don't. I think it's something that we should be able to have moved past, and we should be able to accept, hey, you know, it's okay to experiment with different things inside of the game genre that you may be interested in and outside of the game genre that you may be interested in. In fact, that makes you a better, more well-rounded person and gamer, because now you're able to take these experiences and very possibly discover something new that both experiences were lacking in by combining them together. And that's how we get games like MultiVersus. That's how we get games like Skullgirls. That's how we get games like Brawlhalla. You know, there's so many different games that someone was like, they played one game, they're like, you know, I really like this, but they had a long, varied history of other games that they played, and they had the experience, the expertise, and the know-how as to how to improve upon that and create something entirely new that took the world by storm. So I really don't think limiting yourself into a singular box, especially when it comes to experimenting with different game genres, is a very healthy thing to do.
And this is something I've even talked about with one of my more recent guests, Genesis DC, who's a really strong King of Fighters player from the Ohio scene. And it's just that there are so many different benefits to picking up and trying out a different game. Just getting out of your comfort zone for a little bit, just trying new things you may not be really used to. Like, oh, hey, if you're just like used to playing zoners, maybe consider trying a grappler in this game. Maybe. No. Okay.
Don't
All right,
do that.
moving on. All right, moving on to a different example.
I can't agree with that. I'm sorry.
But even just trying out one game and then seeing, okay, so this is how I approach neutral in footsies in Tekken. Let's see what I can grab from this experience and then see how I can apply it in Street Fighter. And there's just so many things you can take from other different fighting games. And then, one, form like a greater sense of what it is that you personally enjoy as a player, but also just kind of build on the like ever-evolving skill sets that you will cultivate as a fighting game player.
For sure.
So with MultiVersus, we're seeing a substantial amount of support from Warner Brothers. Obviously, as we have mentioned before, there's going to be that really big event that's going to be happening later on in the summer at EVO, with probably one of the largest prize pools that we have seen in EVO in like the past couple of years. I believe I checked some of the prize pools for EVO 2019, which was the last offline EVO that we had. And amongst some of the top 3 prize pools that were featured at EVO 2019, we saw a prize pool of 69K, nice, 47K, and 35K amongst the top 3 titles at EVO 2019. So do you see that as Warner Brothers really trying to make a push to support not only the game in like its initial year of release, but potentially supporting further esports support down the line?
I think that Warner Brothers and Player First Games being the actual developers behind Multiverse, have their priorities lined up to make sure that the competitive fighting game scene understands that they are here and they're ready to be transparent as necessary. They're ready to support the competitive community. They're ready to support the content creators inside this community, and they're ready to support the players of this community. Even just general fans, they're ready to really support. I don't know if you saw, there was a very public tweet that the MultiVersus account made where they showed a picture of Steven Universe, who's a character inside of the game, prior to, I believe, like the private beta that was inside of the game. And after a lot of the feedback that people received, and they had completely changed certain aspects of Steven's model to better suit the taste of people that may not even necessarily be playing the game, may just be enjoying it and watching it, because they wanted to be true to who the character was. They wanted the character to actively reflect who the fans envisioned Steven to be. And things like that, changes like that, don't always come as easily as we see something like that. That was completely unprompted, by the way. It wasn't like the Steven Universe, changed Steven Universe and MultiVersus was trending or something. It wasn't like there was a huge outcry publicly for it. Someone had made a tweet and been like, hey, doesn't Steven model like look kind of weird here? You know, like we should be doing this. And everyone's like, yeah, I guess it does kind of look weird. It doesn't really look like the comic books, you know, and people kind of talked about it a little bit. And just that feedback was enough for MultiVersus to be like, you all know what? Actually, we hear you. We listened to the players actually give their feedback on how this player looked, who we're playing, and we're going to change it, and here's how we changed it. I want to kind of source Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, because there was a lot of public outcry about the models. And even then, Marvel didn't really make a statement. Capcom didn't really make a statement about any models being changed. They just did it, you know?
Right.
That level of transparency is something I'm used to coming from Skullgirls specifically, because as you know, Future Club Dev and Hidden Variable are both very transparent, very open, communicative devs that communicate very, very closely with the community, to the point that people inside the community actually work for these development teams. That's not rare for me to see. It is very, very incredibly rare for me to see it inside of other video games, especially inside the FGC space, where there is not a large amount of negative input. There's just kind of slightly less positive input about it, and the devs are still like, actually, we want to make sure the community is comfortable with this vision of this character. And that is, I think, genuinely a testament to how committed Warner Brothers and Player First Games are to MultiVersus right now.
And do you think that level of communication with the community at large is necessarily difficult for a larger developer to kind of handle?
It's one of those things where I don't think it's that difficult at a small scale, but when you start scaling up to larger entities like Warner Brothers, I do want to mention that Player First is an independent game development. They're not a AAA game developer. They're just publishing this under Warner Brothers. So Player First themselves are not like a large game company, but Warner Brothers, the publisher, is. You know, just like originally back in like Vanilla Skullgirls, Konami was the publisher for Skullgirls, you know?
Right.
But they weren't the people making Skullgirls. They were just helping fund it. In this instance, I don't know the relationship between Warner Brothers and Player First. But what I do know is that ultimately when you have to give back answers to a larger company like that, sometimes there's a lot of red tape that stops things from being as quick as you want them to be in order to be responsive to the community. Sometimes there are things you can't say to the community because there is a lot of red tape with your publisher, you know? And I'm not saying that this is the instance with MultiVersus, but my guess would be that Player First puts the community so high in their understanding for what they want from this game in their future that they are very, very, very willing to work directly with Warner Brothers and kind of expedite that process, whatever it may be for them. That would be my personal opinion, not my official opinion in any way, shape, or form, as reflected with my work with Warner Brothers or Player First. It's just based off my experience with other teams and under other industries, my assumption would be that Player First appears to be a company that fights very, very hard to make sure that the likeness to the game and the likeness to the IP that it's respectably emulating or embodying is very true to what the fans of that community enjoy, despite how much they may have to go through to make it happen. That's very, very rare, and that's very, very difficult to achieve from a game development standpoint. So I have a lot of respect for everyone at the Player First team and for everybody on the Warner Brothers team that are working hard to make this vision of MultiVersus become real and true and embody everything that a competitive platforming fighter should.
And I definitely think that that's a really good approach to really take with a competitive, potentially competitive platform fighting. They are really creating a product that they genuinely care about, that they're putting a lot of time and resources into. And I think that will really help to kind of boost the longevity of the title, even if there ever comes a time where development support ceases on MultiVersus in the far, far distant future. Then it already establishes a nice, solid infrastructure for building a solid community that will continue to support it for the many years to come. So that's really motivating to really hear for people who have just kind of been casually spectating the game, those who have gotten into the alpha.
Well, I would hope that if someone has exclusively been spectating, maybe because they're not necessarily interested in the game, maybe because they haven't gotten the opportunity to play the alpha or gotten into really fighting games in general, I would genuinely hope that they look at Player First and they look at Warner Brothers and they look at the time and effort that Warner Brothers and NRS put into their IP, that Warner Brothers has put into different media that they've made over the year, and as well as the way that Player First is actively approaching one of their very first projects. I would hope that that would be incredibly important to someone who may not necessarily be inside of the genre, especially if they've not necessarily played a platform fighter before, because the one thing that I've learned is that if you look for game companies that do respect you, you'll find that you're a lot happier inside of communities like that. You find a lot more friendly faces inside of things like that, and you tend to enjoy the game significantly longer than you would, whereas with developers that may not necessarily care as much or may not necessarily be as transparent, it's much more difficult to feel important and cared about and to feel as though your time is being valued as a player. So I would genuinely hope that, once again, this is an important aspect of picking up a game for the new age player. You know, I know it wasn't always like this. I know it was always just like, what can I do inside of this game? What does it look like inside of this game? But I feel as though we're at the era of video games, specifically competitive video games, where we've transcended that and we've gotten more into the meat and bones of what's actually behind the scenes of the game.
It's super refreshing to see there to be so much life being breathed into the platform fighter genre. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where things go with MultiVersus and with other platform fighting games in the future.
Play MultiVersus.
So let's take a step back real quick and just talk about you for a moment. You mentioned before you had a history as a competitive Smash Melee player, which I don't feel like is something that people really get to hear a lot about.
I used to play Super Smash Bros. Competitively in college. I went to Virginia Union for my first year, my freshman year, and while I was there, I realized it was a mistake. They were taking a large amount of money from me, and they didn't even have an orchestra program. I played violin for like almost 14 years straight at that point, somewhere like 10 or 11. I don't remember exactly how many years, but it was between like the 10 and 12-ish range, very possibly 14 years.
Yeah.
Like, I was classically taught, and so I really want to continue that training. They didn't have an orchestra there. They didn't have a football team. They had dorms, they had student loans, and they had like half a football field. That they didn't even have like a soccer team or anything. They didn't have a basketball team. The football team had to go practice at VCU's stadium. And that was when I was like, this is a scam. I can't believe I came here for my freshman year. I just wanted the college experience. So I transferred the very next year after taking a year off to save up some money. I transferred to VCU, which was like right down the street. And that was when I started my orientation. And because I had kind of like taken a gap year and everything like that, I was like a little bit older. than some of the sophomores, so it was kind of weird to me. I was like a year older than some of them, and that's a big deal in college. When you're like a year older than someone, it's literally like you might as well be freaking like 45, you know?
Yeah.
I told people, I was like, yeah, you know, I'm 20. They're like, you're 20? Whoa, I'm 18. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, you know? But I was looking for like acceptance, and I was looking to join clubs because I wanted to kind of get used to the whole dynamic. And so they had a video game club there, and I joined because who wouldn't join a video game club in college? I always...
Right, I'm sure we all have.
Literally. I had a very negative experience while I was there, and I've talked about it on past podcasts before. But it was the very first time I'd ever gone to like a fighting game tournament local thing, and it was just horrid. It was really bad. I was not having fun. People were basically explaining stuff to me, and then the minute I started picking it up, they stopped talking to me entirely and just focused on beating me. It was very unfun for me. And I remember leaving and only coming back because there was a guy that I liked there, and when I saw he wasn't there the very next time, I dippied. And I hit him up and I was like, hey, why'd you stop coming here? And he goes, yeah, everybody there is jerks. I don't want to be there anymore. And I was like, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's not just me. I'm not soft. There are other people here who aren't enjoying this. They didn't have to say anything and weird, and they didn't have to question it because they weren't a woman. But yeah, they were getting the same type of vibes. And he joined Super Smash Bros. Club. I joined the Super Smash Bros. Club. I had a lot of fun in the Super Smash Bros. Club. I grew there. It's one of those things where I consistently think, what would my trajectory have been if I had gotten into the FGC there? If I hadn't had a negative experience, who would I have become? And the answer is, would I have become somebody that I am now, that now overwhelmingly tries to make sure that other people don't have that same that same negative experience that she had, like now almost 10, 12 years ago? Would I still be that person? Would I still be trying my hardest to prove that like everyone has a place inside of competitive gaming? Would I still be trying to make sure that representation happens at all levels of competitive gaming? I don't know. And so in some ways, I'm very thankful that that situation happened, because it molded me and helped me experience, even if it was just out of spite, it helped me experience the fact that the reality is not every single competitive offline event has to be unwelcoming to people. There are places that you can go, that you can feel welcome, that you can be happy and just super casual and still feel like you have a family and a home. You don't have to be the highest levels of players to be here. You just have to be here. And I feel like that's not a sentiment enough that's reflected inside of our community sometimes. Because the reality is, as we grow older, we're going to want the next generation to also be here. And the next generation may not be as competitive as us. There will be a very small subsection of people that will be, but it's going to be significantly lower than the people who are just interested in video games. You can develop a competitive personality, but you can't make someone love video games if they don't like it, right? So we should be opening the doors to everyone and letting them see if it's something for them, especially when they're still in the process of finding out who they are and kind of interviewing their different interests, instead of just closing the door because they aren't interested enough, you know? I don't like that aspect of a lot of things that I saw inside of the older fighting game community. And so I made an effort to change that because of my experience there and because of my subsequent experience with the Super Smash Bros. Community. There are still people I know to this day. Like, I literally just called one of my friends yesterday and I cried and I broke down and I was like, freak, Corey, Joe, I miss you all so much. I can't believe, like, I made it. Did you all think I was gonna make it? And they were like, we were actually just talking. I was talking to Brian and Rafiq, and we were just thinking about how you were just that kid who wasn't really good at, like, Super Smash Brothers, but you enjoyed hanging out with us. Sometimes you tripped in front of the GameCube, and the memory card came out, and we all laughed at you because you erased all of our data, and we couldn't play the rest of the local. That was horrible. But we love you. We love you, Sheila. And I was like, aw, you know, and they're all like, we're so proud that you're still here doing what you love, even if you weren't the best at Melee, because ultimately you just wanted to be here around people that were having fun at games, and you wanted to create that experience for other people. And when a community can see that, when a community can foster that, a community outlives their standard lifespan. Now, I don't think my friends knew that at the time. I don't think the organizers that invited me knew that at the time. They just saw a super hyperactive girl that was really excited to be there and really loving video games and really about talking mess occasionally, you know, and hanging out. But I think ultimately what I learned from it is that if you just have people who are just enjoying life and enjoying video games, you're happy regardless. And we need a lot more of that. So to that, I say, play games you love, support your locals, visit Combo Breaker. It's a fantastic event. Rick and his staff do a large amount of grunt work inside of this community to make sure that we are open to everybody and anybody. And I'm seeing more events move towards that. But it's one of those things where Rick definitely found a blueprint, emulated the blueprint, and then scaled that blueprint up even larger to make something that was acceptable to everyone. And that is something that I really genuinely feel as though we don't thank people for enough, you know? And I do obviously also want to thank Kat for her help and side of Combo Breaker because she does a lot as well. And I know there's a very large staff behind Combo Breaker, but ultimately there are so many people responsible for making sure that the event is acceptable to all, family friendly, and above all fun. You know, as a TO, that's something that is very difficult to create, I can tell you from experience. So seeing it inside of an event firsthand and being able to even volunteer to help run brackets for something like that is genuinely such an honor, you know? But yeah, I didn't do super well inside of competitive Melee. I lost a lot. I used to be really, really nice at this game. I didn't own a console. I didn't have a GameCube. I didn't have the game at the time, so I couldn't practice. I would have to go to other people's houses to practice in between, like literally working. At the time, I was working 2 different jobs, going to school as well, and still trying to compete and practice, and that was horrible.
Yep.
But I can say that I was at the point where after a couple of years of like practicing, I was at a point where I could like kind of go like, you know, 3-2 in tournament, and like if someone sat next to me, I could kind of do decent. But there were like definitely very strong players at a local level. But then when I would go to other events with people like that weren't as practiced, I would trounce. And I was like, wait, am I actually really nice at this game? Like, I remember I picked up the game again back in 2019. I'm sorry, 2018, actually, when I was running the stream for a local at the Cave. I was running their Melee streams just to help out because I like helping out locals. And I'm sorry. I sat on a set next to this one Captain Falcon that was just like literally practicing. I don't know what he's practicing. It looked like he was practicing like literally L canceling and L dropping basically through shield. They call it shield dropping. It's when you hit your shield and then you drop through the platform, you retain the invulnerability, right? And I look at this Falcon. I was like, you want to play a set? And he looks at me and is like, I'm actually just practicing something right now. I was like, oh, okay, I understand. It's totally fine, right? And so later, I see a bunch of people playing, blah, 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 and he's still practicing. I was like, look, dude, is it okay if we just play, like, a real quick, like, just first to one or something like that, or even, like, a first to two? Like, we can just play a first to two real quick because there aren't any other sets open, and I have to get the stream started soon, and I really want to play. Yep. And he's like, okay, sure, right? So I pick my Sheik. He goes Captain Falcon as per usual. Captain Falcon into Sheik is like one of the worst matchups for Captain Falcon, but he looks at me, doesn't think I'm a threat. I 4-stock him, and that term basically means that I killed him 4 times before he could take a single life off of me. And then I looked over and I said, dude, you know, I haven't played this game in like now almost 8 years.
Oh no.
He unplugged his controller, wrapped it up, and left the venue.
Damn.
I'm sorry to that man. And if you're for whatever reason watching this right now and you are playing inside the Cave Gaming Center in Fairfax, Virginia back in 2018, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to come off like that. I was just being honest. I literally haven't played this game. I was just enjoying myself a lot and I got lost in it.
You can't just hit my mans with the I don't even play this game that much anymore. Jeez.
Sonic does.
I mean, well, it's Sonic.
Is it Sonic? Or is it something that winners say?
I'm gonna let you have that.
Thank you.
I do relate with like a lot of things with your college experience. First of all, I chose my university because if it didn't have a marching band, I wasn't joining because I was a trumpet player for like 5-6 years at the time. And I'm like, all right, if I don't get a chance to perform here, I am done. We are not going here.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I ended up going to the University of Akron, ended up meeting a lot of people in the Northeast Ohio FGC, and then over the course of the pandemic, like the rest of the state. And just being in that atmosphere of just all of these people who were like so passionate about one particular thing. It's not really something you can really find in many other places.
Yep.
I was familiar with some of the goings on in the FGC way back in 2014. I want to say 2014, 2015. But I never really actually made like the venture into actually going to events until like I'd say 2018 or so. If you're a new player, there's like next to no way of even telling right off the bat that like the concept of locals even exists.
No, nobody knew that, and especially at a point in time when the only thing we had was Facebook. And closed groups were the only way you could find it out, and you only knew that if you typed in the letters FGC, because you didn't know that there were fighting game communities. You had no clue what FGC was whatsoever. You knew what Super Smash Bros. You knew Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but like FGC as a term was completely and totally foreign to me as well. So that's that was poor marketing.
Yeah. I think like the only indication that I had that even tournaments existed in general is that in like the copy of Street Fighter 4, Ultra Street Fighter 4, there's like a slip that you can like redeem on Twitch to get access to like the CPT's like emotes for their Twitch channel during their events. And I'm like, Twitch. Wonder what that is.
I was originally like a big fan of Justin TV, Ustream, and like Twitch, early Twitch, you know? But it was one of those things where it was like I was more aware of tournaments as not being that serious, right? Because in the Smash community, one of the reasons why we trained was basically so we could go to these GameStop tournaments and steal everybody money. Like, that was why we did it, right? Like, because if you went there with a bunch of your friends and you got first or second, that was enough money for y'all to go and get, like, beer or go and get, like, dinner that night, you know? And you didn't have to worry about paying for anything, probably for the next week, honestly. And that type of vibe was enough inside of our community, and it kept us going, you know? Because GameStop was always like, yeah, Super Smash Bros. Tournament, items on, and we're like, oh, this is easy, bro, this is simple, these kids don't even know, you know? And we would just win like $400, $500, $200. on a good day, you would win $400. And I remember the very first time one of my friends got like a $400 check at like a GameStop tournament, and they decided to turn it all in for store credit. And I remember looking at him and being like, what are you doing? You need groceries. We're hungry. We drove you here. Why is this happening? You know, it was...
And no one ate that night.
I ate because I worked 2 jobs. I ate. I had a lot of food. And by a lot, I mean I ordered one whole entree from there. It was... Those are the struggle times, you know, those are the times that we think about. I'm like, you know, these moments are so great. And then I think about those times, I'm like, I'm so glad I'm out of that struggle, bro. I'm so glad I'm out of that.
The friendships that I have developed with some of the dudes in the Cleveland Akron FGC are some of the best friends that I will probably continue to have for the rest of my life. And they're relationships that I genuinely just cherish. And it's one of those things that like really makes me want to like tell people, if you are even remotely interested in fighting games and like fighting game culture at all, you need to make an effort at least once or twice to just go to a local and just see what it's like.
For sure. I agree. It's paramount that you go to an area around you and you see the type of people that typically interact with this game firsthand. Like I said, I had a negative experience, but that's not everybody's experience. Some people have a very positive experience. It's definitely a flip of the coin, if you may.
Right.
You know? But in the same breath, I understand why some people are so apprehensive about going to go visit an offline location for the very first time. There
Yeah.
are a lot of people who may not necessarily physically feel safe inside of a space with people who are primarily men. That's just the truth.
Right.
I grew up with four brothers, and so it's not that I necessarily feel, I don't want to say the word is unsafe around men. It's just that especially black men, I don't necessarily feel scared when I'm inside of a room with them, but I do know that there are quite a few people in general who may not have had the most positive experience in general with men, who have may not have had the most positive experience in general with video game players who are men, especially online. And to that, I don't fault them being afraid and apprehensive of going to locals, you know, which is why I feel as though it's very important, especially for me, to make my voice known so that people do know safe places that they can go to go visit. Oh, Sharpie runs this local. This would be a great place to go for my very first local. If Sharpie's there, I know it's safe. If Combo Queens is there, I know it's safe place to be. If Emily, Jamelian, Persia, Romanova, Saki are there, I know it's a safe place for me to be, and I feel comfortable going there. I feel like that's so important, especially inside of our community, for visibility purposes. And it's somewhat unfortunate, I feel, that there's a very vocal minority, not exclusive to our community, but in the generality of gaming, that do not feel very similarly. In fact, look at people similar to myself and say, I don't know why she's allowed to have a platform. She shouldn't be here. Her representation is not important in the slightest. She's not accomplished enough to be here. When in the reality is, the reason why you're sitting inside of the chair critiquing me is because I did more than just critique people that I saw doing it. I got out and did something, you know?
Right.
So it's kind of a moot point arguing that conversation with the vocal minority, but it's something you have to be aware of because it does actively affect other people that aren't always going to speak up. And so it's important to be presently aware of that while also understanding you're changing that perception of this community, and that's good, you know?
And I think over the years we've started to get increasingly better about creating systems to make these events and these environments a lot safer for more people to be in.
For sure.
We're trying to formalize things. We're trying to create a general structure for how we run our events. And I think especially some of the events that have happened over the course of the pandemic, especially that first summer of 2020, really just showed a spotlight on not just fighting games, but the entire gaming industry, that we need to do better. We need to do a lot more things to make these spaces a lot safer for children, teens, women, people of color, just the whole 9 yards.
And I do want to say, just as an aside, I will allow you to continue after this, but I want to specifically shout out the Code of Conduct team and the side of the fighting game community. I know the Super Smash Bros. Community also specifically created a code of conduct as well, and they got their whole TOC basically team together. I also want to congratulate and shout out and honestly just praise both Combo Breaker and Evo, some of the very first events that have been large-scale events that have been happening this year that have actively put their foot down towards a lot of problematic and negative players and personalities who have attempted to enter their tournaments in order to foster and create a safe environment for their attendees. I want to genuinely applaud them for that decision because I know it's not the easiest decision to make, but they understand for the longevity of our community and for the safety of the community, these decisions are necessary.
And I think it's especially important for organizations like the team at Combo Breaker and Triple Perfect, the team that runs Evo, to really establish that, because we look at these events as the pillars of our community. When we think, what is the one experience, the one moment of time of each and every single individual year that defines what fighting games are and what the FGC is? We think of these major events. We think of Combo Breaker. We think of EVO. We think of CEO. We think of all these major tournaments. And if we can't look to them as symbols of how we should be and how we would treat each other within the space, then why should we be involved with the space?
100%. 100% I agree.
I do feel like we've done a lot better over recent years just to try and create safer spaces for people to try and be in. We've also done a little bit better at being able to communicate when things are going on and where these events are really being run at. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm really proud to have been a part of, both in my time in the Ohio FGC, but also in the Pennsylvania FGC, is that we've developed community websites to try and create a central hub for everything going on in our individual states. It started with one of our TOs in Toledo, a man by the name of Ken Starr, who created a calendar. It's just a simple Google calendar, but it had like listings for all of our events, where they're happening, what games are featured there, links to the brackets, the whole 9 yards. And it was just a Google calendar that people could just update with all their events. You got a tournament going on in Cleveland that's going here on Friday. You got an event going on in Parma. It's happening on Wednesday. Columbus, Monday. Just a simple resource that people could just check and just kind of look at. And then that was further expanded on with the work of one of Akron's biggest community figures, a man named Corjam, who created a website to kind of feature that calendar very prominently, and then also below it have links to all of the community resources you would ever need. Links to our social media profiles, who you would need to contact as far as TOs are concerned, even featuring some of our content creators and streamers in some regard. And what was even better about that is that the Ohio FGC website is also open source. So for those who aren't familiar with what the term open source means, it means that the code and the infrastructure to make a website like this is something you can just go out, you can copy it, and you can just paste it, rearrange some things a little bit, and then do it for your community. In fact, that's what ultimately ended up spawning the Penn FGC website, which I currently run primarily as my thing outside of me doing content stuff. One of the dudes from our Harrisburg scene saw me promoting the Ohio FGC website through one of our tournaments. And he was like, hey, I'm interested in doing this for Pennsylvania. And I'm like, I'm from Pennsylvania. We could do this. It was a big process of like reaching out to a whole bunch of people from different parts of the state, just going on Twitter and being like, hey, we see you run an event. Would you like to be a part of this?
Yeah.
It's done a really good job of like helping me to kind of really introduce myself to a lot of people in the Pennsylvania scene, because I mentioned before, I didn't get into the FGC until I was in college.
Yeah.
And I went to college out of state. So the entire Pennsylvania fighting game community is something that I had never even considered interacting with even prior to that. And if I had known prior to me entering college, I could have gone to the locals in Pittsburgh, which were like 45 minutes away from me. So
that's really the way it be. That's genuinely the way it be. I didn't know that Northern Virginia had a huge Super Smash Bros. Scene. If I knew that, I would have been out here like playing a lot more frequently growing up, instead of like probably focusing on school and soccer and violin and stuff. I wouldn't have been focusing on skateboarding and making music. I would have been just playing video games all day, every day. And I would have been a burnout. Right. You know, like, yeah. WoW already almost got me. I didn't need Super Smash Brothers to also.
Oh, God.
The way Burning Crusade and Lich King had a hold on me, when Cataclysm came out, I almost didn't finish high school. Like, it was a problem. It was an issue.
MMOs are a problem. I got a taste of that when I first like started playing like Skyrim whenever I was in high school. I'm like, oh, it's really like wide like experience. What happens if I were to go to something with like a little bit more people? And I'm like, nope, not now. I need to finish things.
I almost dropped out of college over Skyrim, dude. That was an intense. That game. The way that game controlled me and younger me, like, it still kind of grips me to this day. That's why I say on all my PSO2 content, I'm not an addict, I'm an enthusiast. I can quit anytime I want. I can stop anytime I know. And I know when I'm an addict, and I'll tell you right now, God. I'm not an addict. Until that next scratch comes out. Then I may be borderline. I mean, you got to get that banner, you know.
One of my favorite people that I follow for like really anything that I need to know about the social media or marketing space is a man named Devin Nash, and for a long time, Eve was that game for him.
Yeah.
And just hearing it, it's incredible and also horrifying to hear that everyone talking about, like, yeah, Eve, like, stole, like, an entire year of my life. And then, like, you would see people like, yeah, that same.
WoW stole half a decade of my life.
Oof.
Yeah, it was not okay. I almost feel like my parents were going to have an intervention for me
because of, like, how poorly I would do in school. There would be days where I would tell my parents that I needed the computer for homework, and I would just be raiding. And the only day that didn't happen was mate. That was it. And during maintenance, I would go out and go, like, play soccer. And then I would come back in and boot the game straight back up. 7 o'clock in the morning. Like, just to play.
God.
Just to play.
God.
I would walk to school, walk back, just to come back to play after my parents left. Like, it was the way I became, I feel, a threat to society, polite society, and borderline, I want to say, schizophrenic over this game. Like, it was an actual issue. You know? But I'm better now.
So if one day we lose you to the void, we kind of have an idea why.
Yeah, call Sega. They know why. They know why. PSO2 NGS knows why. Like, I'm not lost. I'm just over here in Retton, dude.
One of the things that I feel like kind of has to be talked about, Skullgirls. As mentioned
I don't know
before,
what that game is. I've never heard of it before in my life.
All right, so you did a TikTok about Among Us.
Did you say Skullgirl?
I will eventually get to that too. One of the things that can be very easily said about you and your brand, when people think of Sharpie, they think Skullgirls. And conversely, which is even more impressive, when people think of Skullgirls, they also often think of you.
Yes.
And that is a type of brand association that I think most content creators dream of.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you up until 2020 happened.
I was about to say it can also be a blessing and a curse, which is why
it was fantastic, literally until it wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, so
when did that start? You mentioned before that you were in the Smash scene, and then like a couple years later, you started to dabble with the fighting game scene a little bit, and then that eventually led to Skullgirls.
The reason why I pushed Skullgirls so hard is I was at a very difficult point in my life when I was playing Skullgirls. As I had stated before, I had just finished playing Melee competitively. I was also, I don't want to say like competitively playing League of Legends, but I was very involved in League of Legends and I wanted to play competitively, but I didn't have equipment to play League of Legends. Like I had a laptop that eked out like 20 FPS, occasionally 30 FPS, if I was really, really nice to it. But on a normal day, it was somewhere between 15 and 20 FPS normally when I tried to play the game. So I couldn't stream. I could like locally record, or I could try to stream, and it would be like literally frames. What had happened inside of the League of Legends community was a lot of people were saying, well, Sharpie's toxic. You know, Sharpie is very, very rude. She's very, very mean. She's too energetic. We don't want that here unless she's behind the camera, not in front of the camera. We're okay with her locally recording stuff and making content because she can make content amazingly, but we don't want her on the microphone. We don't want to play with her. We don't want to like put her in positions where she can do things. And then when I got into the Skullgirls community, especially like as a streamer, like I really want to stress that I got into Skullgirls randomly. I was Facebook friends with Sage because of a mutual friend that we had. He's a part of a clan called House of 3000 with Devin 3000, like a couple of other people and stuff, Numbers, John Numbers and stuff, and Mike Kirby. And I was like, I would watch them all the time, and I knew them because my friend went to college with them, and we all, like, my orchestra friend went to college with him. Yeah, no. Literally, the reason I got into Skullgirls was because I knew an orchestra friend who went to college with these people who played and streamed Super Smash Bros. Brawl at the time. I didn't like Brawl, but I did like Smash. I just liked Melee, and I was like a Melee and PM elitist. So I'd watch their streams and be like, man, I wish I could play. This is the second best thing I could do, you know?
Right.
And it was fun watching Sage play because Sage is an inspired Brawl player. I don't know if you've ever seen him play. He's very, very good. He's very, very good. He's just an amazing player. And so I'd watch him play, and then one day I started following Sage on Twitter, and I started getting back on Twitter and stuff, and I started following you know, they give you recommended follows and stuff. You see funny tweets that Sage would retweet, and I would follow this guy and that guy. And occasionally they would host, like, Hops, who would stream Skullgirls. And then I remember one day Hops was just like, who wants a free game? And I'm like, I want a free game. I love video games. Free games? Yes, me. And they gave me a code, and I redeemed the code, and I started playing the game, and I started streaming myself playing the game because it was really low requirement, so I could stream it, and it wasn't like League. So I was, like, helping and learning to get better, but I was very bad at the game at first. And admittedly, watching myself, especially knowing I was playing on keyboard, I was very tilted and very angry when I couldn't do certain things. But that didn't stop people from the community from coming in and being like, hey, why don't you try it like this? Like, I'm talking about, I broke down to the point of tears at one point because I couldn't do a DP. And somebody was literally on a Skype call with me. Somebody in Puerto Rico with inconsistent internet helping me understand why I wasn't a horrible human being just because I couldn't consistently do a DP. You know?
Right.
That's the type of camaraderie and that's the type of friendship I found inside the Skullgirls community. I want to say I originally felt, especially before everything that happened in 2020 happened, I originally felt as though the only way I could ever truly give back to the community that helped me feel as though I had a home away from home, a secondary family that I could love and trust, a group of people who understood me and accepted me regardless of who I was. As much as I loved anime girls, as much as I loved like video games, and as loud and rambunctious as I was, didn't call me toxic, understood I was frustrated, helped me understand the game, helped me grow as not only a person but a player. The only way I felt I could pay them back was by helping build the community so that more people would come in here and the game would get more support. And I genuinely felt that way, and I genuinely felt like it had become my mission to do this. And as I started exploring more into the fighting game community, I began realizing more and more that people just didn't respect the game I was playing. And I didn't understand why, you know? Because it was a good game, and I met all these awesome people playing it, and everyone inside the community that had been so nice to me. How could you say such a mean thing about a game, especially when you've never played it? Why don't you just come play it with me and I'll show you? Like, have you played it? Just come play it, you know? And that was how I started becoming. I started learning different ways to kind of get people to play it and help them understand why I loved it so much, and help them understand how wonderful this community is, and help them understand that even though we may be like just a little bit bonk horny on the main, we actually care a lot about people, and we actually do try to make sure that people are able to succeed. There was a guy on Skullheart, which is the forum website that we had for Skullgirls, who used to just go through the front page every single day, see when it was someone's birthday, and wish them happy birthday every single year consistently for like literally 7 years straight. And there was one day that he took off. I'm sorry. He's such a sweet person, genuinely. And he posted when he came back and said, I'm so sorry. One of my family members passed. And that's why I couldn't wish you all happy birthday. But I apologize, and I hope you're okay with me wishing you a late happy birthday. And shit like that just gets me, because that's a person. That's a human being. That's someone who is going out of their way to, like, make sure that someone else's day is happy. I don't understand how someone could hate a community like that and not try the game, you know? So I just felt like if someone was going to be loud about it, it needed to be me. And that's why organically so much of Skullgirls is Sharpie, and so much of Sharpie is Skullgirls, because to me it's not just a game, it's a family. It's genuinely a family of people. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And that's why you should play Skullgirls, which is currently on sale with the season pass right now for 15% off. Go to playskullgirls.sharpiepls to get it. I'm sorry. These are real tears. I'm so sorry. I was not expecting to cry right there. I remembered him, and I just remembered the message, and it got me a little bit.
You're good. You're good. If I'm remembering correctly, there will also be a Skullgirls booth at Combo Breaker.
There will for like every single year. Skullgirls always has a booth. The developers always have a booth there. The Skullgirls community shows up for Combo Breaker, and if you're not already registered for Combo Breaker, which is literally in a week, and you want to do emergency registration for whatever reason, make sure you register for Skullgirls, because it is that game. Also, Black Dahlia will be showcased inside of Alpha exclusively at Combo Breaker, so.
That's the one reason why I am so sad that I will not be able to go to CB this year.
Me too. It's frustrating for me because I saved up all this money. I have the rooms. I already got the the airplane tickets, which I end up having to refund, and just got, miles credit, which hopefully I'll be able to use for Evo. But it's like one of those things where it's like, when your mental health isn't there, it's not there. And that's just the truth. You got to be kind to yourself before you can be kind to others. And I learned that this year. My body gave out, so... I want to go to Evo. I absolutely have to go to Evo. Like, I was going to go to 2 FGC events this year. It was going to be Combo Breaker, and it was going to be Evo. And it was only going to be Evo if Skullgirls got in there, and Skullgirls got in there. So, I was like, I have to go to Evo this year. It's required.
You have to.
I really wanted to go to Combo Breaker. Those were the 2 FGC events I was going to go to, and it's so unfortunate that I have to miss out on one of the most, I feel, important Combo Breakers inside of the Skullgirls story,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, that's how I felt with 2020, because I don't think I've mentioned this too frequently in any of my videos, but one of the privileges of being involved with a college esports fighting game club was that our greater esports program gave us funding to do things that we wouldn't be able to do normally otherwise.
Yep.
So the first year of us having this club, we were able to send 7 students, myself included, to EVO 2019, and that's actually how I got to attend my first major.
That's awesome.
And we were planning on doing the same. Well, there's a darker side to that story, but I might get back to that in a moment. But we were going to send, I think, a similar number of students, possibly even more, to Combo Breaker in 2020. I was working through all the paperwork. I was getting all the logistics set up, and then world shut down, and I'm like, yeah. It also sucked because, in addition to being a Street Fighter player primarily, I'm also a Sam Show person. And Sam Show got into EVO for its second year, and I was not convinced it was going to come back for so many reasons.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm happy that game got a chance at EVO. It's relatively unfortunate for everybody, yourself included, about the online performance of that game. I genuinely feel for you. Y'all needed the offline scene, You needed it.
We did. Grand Blue needed it too.
Yes. That game was not. That game was just so unlucky.
It deserved better.
It deserved
better.
Like, genuinely, the most messed up thing about it was I was actually considering playing Grand Blue. I was getting to the point in my Skullgirls career where I was like, what I really should be doing is I should really be learning other games that are really interesting to me, and then getting pretty good in those games, and then bringing people back to Skullgirls.
Hey.
I should be doing the Sonic Fox. I should be doing that. I looked at a lot of the characters, and I was feeling them out, and I remember even, like, the local, before the monthly that we were going to have for Xanadu, playing Grand Blue a little bit, and being really mad at Latvia, and hating everything about that character. But, was not to be. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't play a single game that has bad online. I just don't do it. I'm a streamer first, honey. I have to respect myself and my following by not playing games that don't play well online.
And for me, and I think for a lot of us, like, the pandemic was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, once we were forced to deal with these games online, we just couldn't.
Oh, yeah. No, because I watched the Dragon Ball Z World Championship. Yeah, I feel for everybody involved. That was... I watched the frames drop. I watched the frames drop in Grand Finals.
Oh, no.
I watched them drop, and I didn't even have Stream Chat open, and I already know what Stream Chat was saying, And I was just thinking to myself, what a horrible experience for these players. I didn't necessarily feel bad for the commentators. Commentators are going to get paid regardless. They're going to get the jobs. They're going to go off. They're going to get the content, right? I felt really bad for the players. I felt really, really bad for the players. And then I thought about it some more, and I felt kind of bad for the developers because I knew that they didn't have the budget to implement the changes that they would need to make the online good enough that this wouldn't happen. And
Yep.
so it's like, it's such a layered issue because if you don't implement it early in the process of the game's creation, it's not happening. And all you're doing at that point is just break fixes, super duper
Yep.
small things. And
Yep.
now that offline's back, all these Dragon Ball players are like, oh, are we coming back? And most of the community is gone. Like, they have disappeared. They have moved on to greener fields. They are playing Skullgirls, okay? They're happy here. We love them. And you know what loves them? Well, definitely not Peacock or Robo, because online, those characters are just not always the most fun. But but they're
It is what it
enjoying
is.
themselves. They're enjoying themselves genuinely in other games, and that's a pleasure to see people whose first fighting game experience may have been Dragon Ball Fighters, now playing Skullgirls, now playing Brawlhalla, now trying MultiVersus, and just experimenting and being like, hey, there's more in here, talking about very possibly enjoying Project L. You know, it's nice to see that the game was able to bring a lot of new people into the game and be that first experience for people. It's unfortunate that it wasn't able to foster it through one of the most important times that the fighting game community needed to retain people. When it was
Right.
given that baton and it wasn't able to hold it the entirety of the time. That's frustrating to see as an organizer and an older fighting game community member.
Yeah, Dragon Ball especially is one of the more recent fighting game titles that I think did a really fantastic job of bringing a whole bunch of people into the scene.
Yeah.
And a couple other titles that have done that a little bit more recently. Guilty Gear Strive, Melty Blood, Type Lumina, both games that I was not expecting to be as well received, admittedly, as the ultimate ended up being. Fortunately, in the case of both games, we did end up getting rollback for both. Strive, we kind of had to push a little bit for that one, but we ended up getting it.
Arxis just don't like rollback. It's like Japanese devs just don't necessarily care about online the same way. And when you look at the size of Japan and you look at the size of the continental United States,
Yep.
it makes sense as to why Japan doesn't necessarily care as much about rollback netcode. You know?
They also just have a better internet infrastructure than we
They
have in the
have
US.
significantly stronger infrastructure at their core, but that's a completely different conversation that,
Yes.
unfortunately, if I went to, I'm relatively certain I would lose a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely.
You saw my Twitter. You know who I am. You know what
Yes.
I'm about, and
Yep.
you don't want to take me there.
That is not a fight that we want to deal with. As mentioned, the pandemic, rough for a lot of games in general just because of bad rollback. Rough for the Skullgirls community for other reasons, which have been said numerous amounts of times. I do not want to give this individual earned media, but I'm just going to just say it was rough for you all, and I really sympathize with you on that.
I appreciate that.
But I will say, I think Skullgirls has seen a very powerful resurgence in these past couple of years in a way that I don't think was really expected if this whole state of the world didn't really end up the way how it ended up being. We ended up getting the Skullgirls Championship Series. The game is being expanded with additional DLC with its first season pass. Would you say that the game's in a better spot?
I feel as though, to a majority of the public who may not necessarily be very invested inside of the Skullgirls community, outwardly, Skullgirls appears to be going through a large resurgence. For someone who has been inside of the Skullgirls community for a very long time, facilitated the Skullgirls tour season 1 and season 2, provided over $15,000 worth of pop bonuses, helped provide an opportunity for several players, international players, and funded them to come to Combo Breaker back in 2016. Calling this a resurgence after everything that we had been through prior feels very diminishing to a lot of the efforts of tournament organizers who were invested in the community prior to the mobile game coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Do I agree that the mobile game is responsible for a large number of new talent that we're actively receiving inside of the game today? Yes, no question about it whatsoever. To call the community a resurgence now doesn't do justice to the people who have remained inside of the community the entirety of these last now almost 10 years and have actively been working and waiting for us to get an opportunity at EVO as an official main game offline. Not necessarily waiting, just understanding that if this opportunity ever arose, we would need to be prepared, we would need to be organized. There are a large number of times that the baton has been passed down different generations of Skullgirls players, and I was very blessed to very briefly have that baton. And I commentated EVO, obviously, last year. I was the very first woman to ever be featured at EVO Online, as you know, and I'm really hoping for the opportunity to commentate Skullgirls again this year, when EVO, for the very first time, offers Skullgirls as a main game in an offline setting. I did submit my application, but, you know, I won't know until I know.
Right.
And it's one of those things where I'm thankful that the public now currently has their eye on Skullgirls. I'm thankful that a lot of people are seeing Skullgirls and that it's getting accepted at a large scale as a traditional fighting game and it gets its place at the table. Mm-hmm. I feel as though it's not necessarily fair to say that this is the final resurgence or this is the resurgence of Skullgirls when we've been fighting for so long to be seen. And we were actively seen at Combo Breaker. To me, the reason why this year is so important is because Rick, the person who originally helped give Skullgirls a main stage, gave us a platform to talk our stuff on, is now heading EVO and has fought to make sure that Skullgirls gets a spot there. To me, attending EVO this year is paying my dues to the man who made sure that the community that I love got a voice, you know?
Right.
This is no disrespect to RTS or to Frame Perfect or to 10.0 or to PlayStation. It's just when someone goes out of their way, when they have literally nothing on the line besides, I see how hard this game is fighting right now, and I sympathize with them as someone who comes from a similar game like Killer Instinct, where people didn't necessarily respect our game. That means a lot more to me than how many people are actively inside of my community. I could really care less if there were only 5 people playing Skullgirls. If all 5 of those people love the game, I would much rather have them inside of the community than have a bunch of people who are only inside of the game because the game's at EVO, you know?
Right.
Because those 5 people I know will give back to the community the exact same amount I give to them, if not more, you know?
Right.
In that vein, to answer your question, do I think Skullgirls is going through a resurgence right now? On paper, yes, right? On paper, EVO, largest fighting game tournament in the world. We did it. Largest pot bonus in the history of Skullgirls. We did it, right? A main stage game, like blah, 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 new DLC. We did it, right? Skullgirls came out with like 3 new DLC characters before this, though, you know? And it's not like we were at EVO before this. We were just at Combo Breaker. Eliza was featured for the very first time at like Twin Galaxies. Was there fanfare over that from the general public? No. So do I feel like Skullgirls is having their public resurgence? Sure. Yes, of course. Do I feel as though the Skullgirls community feels as though this was a resurgence? Not necessarily. It's just the next chapter in the very long history of Skullgirls, and I'm just so incredibly honored to still be able to be here for this part of our history.
And I wanted to just clarify here, the phrasing of that question isn't necessarily to diminish the...
No, I completely understand.
The impact of, or the effort of the people in the Skullgirls community.
Yeah.
In the FGC, we kind of like operate within like the bubbles of our respective games. So we're very well attuned to what is going on within the sphere of the specific game that we're focusing on, the specific city or region that we kind of tend to operate in. From the outsider looking in, you just become a little bit more and more aware of it. But if you're in the scene, witnessing everything from the very start up to now, then this is just the result of our work.
You could say the same thing about Killer Instinct or Vampire Savior or Brawlhalla, you know? And I'm so sorry. I'm really not trying to state that you like had like a mean-spirited question or anything.
No, you're good.
I just want to be totally candid because I feel as though in the past, when people have asked me the question, I shy away from being 100% truthful with it, you know, and just being like, the reality is like, we've been here this whole time and no one really saw us really before Combo Breaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's frustrating having to consistently hear that we're only important because we're in EVO this year, when the reality is we've been important this entire time. There are people who matter inside of our community this entire time. For a very long time, a lot of players only hung out with Skullgirls players because we were the ones that people wanted to hang out with at events. Ask Katana Prime. who he hung out with at events, because I promise you he was hanging out with all the Skullgirls players. Like, I promise you he was. There were so many people. Persia would hang out with us. You know what I mean? So it's like,
right.
To me, the cool kids have always been the Skullgirls players. Maybe not to the widespread FGC, but at events, everyone has always known that if you find someone playing Skullgirls, you have a home, because we're out here to spread the love, you know? That wasn't very reflected, obviously, 2 years ago, but we are working very, 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 very hard to get back to our roots of what our community was founded upon, and that's the principles of goodwill and love and kindness, you know? And that's what makes me happy, and that's what makes me feel fulfilled being a part of this community.
What is it going to take to get you in the game? Matt and Wooly are in the game.
Yeah.
Sonic Fox is a cameo in the game.
Yeah.
Do we need to get you in the background as an NPC? Do we need you to voice a character? What do we gotta do?
I would argue that Matt and Wooly are in the game because they paid a lot of money to make sure that Skullgirls had a future, and they were creating content at a point in time that was instrumental for Skullgirls to be in the public eye. They did that, and they deserve their spot. I would argue that Sonic has been fighting for a very long time to make sure that this game is visible to competitive players, and Sonic actually got Yipes to stream the game. Sonic has been actively networking with really large players and bringing them into the Skullgirls community, if only to just enjoy going to Denny's with us, or even just to, like, speak about tech inside of our game. Sonic does a lot for this game that they don't always necessarily talk about, and it's not always my place to discuss, but I believe that Sonic also deserves their place that they have inside of the cameo of the game. I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable being a background character inside of the game unless I knew that all DLC had been completed and that the developers were being paid for their time. If I were to get, like, a message today from Future Club Dev and from Hidden Variable saying, "Hey Sharpie, we respect all the time you've put into the Skullgirls over these years. We respect all the money you've put back into us. If you're able to raise this amount of money, we will make you a background character inside the game." I would love that. I would be incredibly honored if they asked me to voice a character inside of the game. I'm not going to ask to do that until I know that someone much more capable and someone much more talented is able to occupy that role. I would feel uncomfortable having my very first voice role be inside of the game that I've been promoting for several years, you know, especially not having a large voice acting resume behind me. So that's how I feel about it, and I'm incredibly flattered by all the people who are consistently like, "Sharpie, you should be a character in the game, and they should be a grappler. Sharpie, you should be a voice pack inside of the game, and your voice pack should be about grapplers and wrestlers. Sharpie, you should be a background character. You should be inside of a wrestling outfit because you're a grappler." You know, like, I get it.
It's kind of a monkey's paw.
It's really funny, and I appreciate it, and I'll joke back with people, but I do want people to understand that this is someone's livelihood. There is a lot of ROI that they're responsible for putting into the game to make sure that they're able to maintain their livelihood. And as funny as it is for memes to think of me in the background or as a voice or as a character, I would much rather they focus on creating and following through with what they've already promised the community instead of taking time to address, like, putting me in as a meme. I'm very thankful that I'm able to work with Future Club Dev as a social media consultant, and I would be honored if I was asked to voice a future DLC character. But it's just one of those things that I'm not actively trying to push for until I know that they're at a place where that's something that would be a lot easier on the developing team than it currently is right now.
And I appreciate the genuine and humble response to that question.
I just don't want anybody to starve trying to, like, appease my fans or audience, you know? That's really what it is like, so many people are trying to be really nice, being like, you should be inside of the game. And if I get upset about not being inside of the game and my audience, like, well, we're gonna boycott Skullgirls until Sharpie's in the game. Well, then guess what? Y'all don't get 4 DLC. You now only get 3 because now they have to focus all this time and energy on putting me as a character in the background. Like, who wants that? How does that help the game and the community? It doesn't, you know?
You are in a very powerful position, and it is comforting to know that you very clearly understand that, as some others who are in similar positions to you may not have that realization that their words have such weight.
It's just one of those things that I've really been reflecting on, especially like as I get older. I used to just be really angry and mad about everything, you know?
Right.
I'm like a black female in the United States of America.
There are a lot of things to be angry about.
There are a lot of things to be angry about. And what I started realizing was that being angry and being spiteful isn't a healthy way of addressing the things I want to change. Even if it results in me actively helping things change. It's not healthy because it stops me from achieving the levels of change that I want to achieve. And it stymies my growth, to be very candid with you. And so I've started trying to utilize my power in a more positive manner to help uplift people instead of taking things down, because I feel as though the concept of dismantling certain practices and certain organizations exclusively because they don't cater to me is significantly less productive than building up and creating my own and creating an audience that will be able to grow and be nurtured and populate their own communities. I feel as though that's a much more creative and a much more influential use of my time. So at this point in time, I don't really spend time being angry about things not necessarily happening. I choose to focus on what I can control, what I can do, and what changes I can positively make on the community.
It's better for you to be genuine. It's just
no,
authentic.
that's my mantra, genuinely. Like, I feel as though people who meet me know who I am inherently, right? I may have days where I'm like much more sad or much more happy or much more angry or much more like frustrated, but at my core, this is who I try to be, you know? Just organically, this is how I am. I'm frustrated by a system that doesn't always necessarily contribute to the growth of people of color, specifically black individuals and queer individuals. I am frustrated by a culture inside of gaming that overwhelmingly chooses to ignore female and non-binary players. I'm upset by the fact that larger gaming companies sometimes choose to stop positive growth inside of video games in order to appease masses that don't even necessarily care about the longevity of video games. But I'm not going to let that stop me from laughing about the fact that somebody said something really stupid on Twitter, or a cat just fell and was completely shocked by the fact that they fell off the bed. You know, like, I'm not going to stop that from allowing me to enjoy life, because I'm still going to be here until I'm not one day, you know? And so if I don't enjoy now, then what is the point? You know? I really hope that comes through in like everything that I do and every single part of my aspect, that I really am just trying to make everyone else's time inside of this community much more positive, because it's what I would have wanted when I was younger. And I really hope that that's what's reflected inside of the work, both after I'm long gone from this world and even after I'm done playing fighting games and promoting fighting games, you know? He's like, man, how do I follow that up?
That authenticity is something that people genuinely respond to.
Well, if they didn't respond to it, then I'd probably just call him a grappler main and move on.
I mean,
I feel bad because my crutch is to always, whenever I'm faltering on something, just to blame a grappler. And that's because
they just want to give you a hug.
My fiance plays grapplers. So it's like, whenever something goes wrong in the house, I blame him. You know? And
I mean, that just sounds like a normal relationship.
With a exactly. No. Having to specifically correct a grappler player just because they're not necessarily thinking 100% of the time is just on par with the type of person who plays grapplers, you know? Like, no shade. That's real. That's truthful. And as much as I hate grapplers, the only thing I literally hate more than grapplers is actually Shotos. Shotos don't respect any aspect of the game, any aspect of neutral. They said, regardless of where you are on the screen, I'm going to be there, and you are going to die.
So that tweet wasn't a meme. Huh.
I don't care for them. I don't care for Shotos. I don't have respect for people who play Shotos. I don't feel as though they should be allowed to enter tournaments. until they can actually pick a style of play. I don't feel like Shotos deserve to be considered video game players. I don't feel that, because like they can hardly be considered, to be very honest, like.
But they're the foundation of fighting games.
You mean because developers didn't know how to literally program advanced video game mechanics back inside of the 90s and 80s? Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you're talking about? Oh, okay. No. It's fine. It's cool. You know what? If Shotos need to feel like they are responsible for something bigger than them, let them have it. When they wake up one day and realize that it was all a lie, that they weren't actually as good as they thought, and that they don't actually have any real skills or neutral, all they do is DP. It'll be a cold day in hell.
I'm a Poison and King player, so I have no stake in this.
It makes more sense why you gravitate towards my content. You're like, what is she going to say about grapplers today? How is she going to insult me and my loved ones today? I'm excited. Excited.
It's got to be glorious. One thing that you did mention earlier on today, and I actually was kind of hoping to eventually get around to talking about this, you were a violinist.
I am. Or I was previously. I haven't played in a little bit of time. I no longer feel comfortable like performing in front of people. I now only play when I'm like incredibly, I guess the word that the kids use is depressed. You know, like I am.
Or when you reach a milestone on TikTok.
I will almost never play violin in public until I feel confident enough that I'm at the level where I'm comfortable performing again. It's one of those things where it was like before I could really like play video games, I was able to like play music. You know, my mom was very, 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 very specific that everyone of her children would know how to read music and play an instrument. So it was like required that we all played an instrument. Like I played violin. One of my other brothers played cello. One of my other brothers played saxophone. One of my other brothers played violin. And then the youngest, Austin, he didn't really play anything, you know? But me and my other brother who plays violin, he also taught himself piano. I learned piano. I taught myself guitar. I taught myself upright bass. I taught myself bass guitar. Like when you were classically taught, you can really teach yourself how to play any other instrument, really, especially when it's something like the violin, which like helps you understand so many fundamentals in music theory. So yeah, I was like classically trained for 17 years. I went up and down like the East Coast with my like school. We would go to different places and we would like perform. I would sometimes busk just when I was like going outside in practice, have my case open and people just tossing dollar bills and stuff. I really enjoy releasing that energy into music. It's transcending because sometimes, especially as a Black woman inside of this world, people don't want to acknowledge your existence because you look different than them, and they don't feel as though they can relate to you because you look so different from them. But what I learned is that through music, you're able to communicate at a human level, and you're able to touch emotions that usually aren't allocated to someone like you by certain people. And so that became really like a powerful way of me to like express certain emotions through music. I would write songs about emotions I was feeling as a teenager. I would write about my relationship with my father. I would write about how I felt silenced inside of certain areas of my life. I would write about my friends, and I would write about like challenges that I found as I tried to grow up. That's very personal for me, and it's not always something that like I want to share. And now at this stage in my life where I'm like so talented and considered like a savant by a lot of people, it's really hard for me to feel comfortable presenting a very vulnerable side of myself in an area that I'm not necessarily as strong at anymore, because it took a wayside to so many other aspects of my life. Like during college, there was a point in time where I was basically working 3 jobs and doing college, and I was not competing at all. So I would be in school, and then I would go to Starbucks to go work my first job, and then I would go to a restaurant to go work my second job, and then I would go to the gym, and then on Wednesdays I would actually teach violin to like kids inside of the area after their parents bought lessons from me, right? To make ends meet so I could afford to eat. And that was like how my life went in college for like the last 2 years of my college experience. And that was something I kind of look at now and be like, how did I do all of that? How am I like literally still breathing? How did I not pass out of exhaustion in a gutter somewhere? But it was one of those things where it was like, I was truly at a point in my presentation specifically with music where I felt comfortable enough to kind of like water it down and teach somebody else how to do it at a very basic level. Like, it's very easy to do. I could honestly probably teach violin today, to be very candid with you. It's a very easy thing for me to do. I'm very, very good at teaching people how to do things at a very basic level.
Right.
I don't think I can perform at the level I used to perform at any longer, which is very frustrating to me, especially to admit, like, publicly now. But it's just the truth. I wish I had kept up with it, but the reality is if I had put a lot of time and energy into violin, I would not have accomplished half the things I did now in gaming.
Right.
And the reality is as well that I was lucky enough to be passionate enough about music, and I want to say disciplined enough in music to study it more rigorously on my own and expand into music theory and to study and learn how to compose and learn advanced music theory and learn how to create and learn why music works the way it does, so that I can then take that and use it now inside of my current content creation. Because back when I was in college, like, YouTube was a thing, but it wasn't like a huge money-making thing. Like, people didn't take it seriously like that, you know, and equipment was expensive. Like, back when I was in college, they had Dazzles. They were still using Dazzles, you know?
Yes.
So
Mine's
I
in my closet.
Exactly. So, like, I never thought, if I had known then that it would be a reality for me to just drop out and, like, literally exclusively play my violin, I would have done it. I would have actually done it, and I wouldn't have literally finished any aspect of my schooling whatsoever. I would have just gotten an IT job somewhere, just like I do now, and just been playing violin in my spare time and making that money, you know? But it's difficult to do when you don't know the future, and something that seems really unstable like YouTube, especially when you're this skin color, which, I mean, I've had... My YouTube account almost got compromised early this year. Like, I had a bunch of videos that were, like, mass deleted. Like, people have sent me hate through and through. I've been raided by 4chan on my Twitch stream. The internet has shown me that they're not always appreciative of the fact that I'm here, but I don't care.
Right.
I will be very candid, though. If that was my full-time job and that was all I had to go off of and that happened, it would be very frustrating knowing that it would be difficult for me to provide for my future family and for me, just because people on the internet have decided that I no longer deserve to exist. It's a very difficult thing to commit to when you look like me. So it's nice to have something like IT to fall back on.
Yeah, I always lend a certain degree of respect to people in the creative fields who try and pursue that as a full-time career, because it is very mentally strenuous to try and go through from the day to day, month to month.
No, they taught me that. I remember there was like a career day or something like that in like 6th grade, or like I think it was like 7th grade or something like that, and I was in my teacher's class, and they were like, you have to pick a thing, and we had to research different salaries for different types of jobs and like pick the type of job we wanted. And I picked, I think, like a software engineer that made like $90,000 a year or something like that. And I picked like a little like PT Cruiser type car, which is ironically one of the cars I did have. Really funny. Really, really
Manifesting
funny.
into the world.
That was actually my very first car. I got very, very lucky. But it was one of those things where I was like looking at it and I was like, well, I really want to be a violinist. And I looked at how much money they made, and they actually made less than teachers. They made like, I think it was literally under the federal poverty level. It was like literally $22,000 a year or something like that. Something ridiculous. And teachers made like 25. Yeah, it was very sad. Like, the world's saddest violin couldn't afford to be heard for that amount of money, you know? And so when I look at that, and then I look at the software engineer making 90,000, I'm like, man, this is a really hard choice. you know? So I was
this is very difficult.
Gosh, I don't know what I'm gonna do, you know? And I always knew my passion was music. Like, I love music. I loved soccer. I loved experimenting with music and creating music and like composing music, but it won't pay off at the level that I need it to in order to sustain my family. So I even did more research, and it was like many people inside of these orchestras, unless they are like literally in the top 1%, at which point, once again, it's not even 100% viable, because typically people like that tend to get arthritis or carpal tunnel and are unable to play after they hit the age typically of like 35. They can no longer do the thing that gives them money anymore. Like,
Right.
and that's so crazy to me. So I was just like, okay, computers. My dad
Yep.
already works at Microsoft. He's making enough money. Like, I'm watching my mom do all of this stuff with choir. Like, she's always making a couple of extra bucks here and there, but it's nowhere near how much my dad is making from Microsoft right now. He can also work from home. Like, what am I? This is obviously the job I should go into, you know?
Yep.
So, as much as I love music, as fulfilled as it makes me in order to, like, share a lot of the music that I create, and to also share my experiences through music, which are able to communicate with others at a human level, there is just not enough money in it to provide for my family the way I want to provide for my family. I
Right.
really wish there was. I really wish we lived inside of a world where I'm able to be as creative as I want and make every single end that I want to meet, and also give like my future family the best life possible. But that's not
Right.
the world or the reality that I occupy, unfortunately.
Right.
I'm very blessed to even be this far, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my closest friends in college is a phenomenal musician. Has performed trumpet at like various different like competitive competitions. He grew up from a high school that was very like oriented around that. And whenever I like saw him and I saw all of like the time and the effort and the passion that he puts into what he does, I'm reminded of a conversation that I had with my high school band director, where we were casually talking about the direction that I would probably take career wise, because compared to some of the other trumpet players that we had at my high school, I was first chair at the time and being section leader at some point, so I was considered probably one of the better of the more recent ones we had. And I told him I would eventually be pursuing a career in STEM, again working in software.
Yeah.
The one thing that he mentioned was that if you were going to pursue something like music, then you would have no question as to whether or not you were going to do it.
Yeah.
You'll just know.
I understand your teacher a lot, because one of the things that I always wanted to do was I always wanted to do music professionally. I live in the suburbs of Northern Virginia, so a lot of people inside this area are government contractors and are subsequently very wealthy, so they're able to learn at a significantly younger age than I was able to be taught, and they have equipment and they have private tutors, and they are able to take private lessons, and I wasn't afforded any of that. I would just have to practice on my own and just hope that I'm doing it right, and just really, really practice and just grind it out. And it was frustrating hearing from certain teachers that I had that I should just give up because I wasn't even in the same league as other people that wanted to do it, you know? Because I really did want it. I really did want to be a music major. I really wanted it so bad, and I just didn't understand why it wasn't possible for me. And it's not like my teachers didn't understand that I wanted it, you know?
Right.
It was more of like, they were like, you're not at the same level. You're too far behind. You don't have the money to be at the level that you would need to be at in order to do this professionally. You have a lot more time and effort and a lot more passion than these other kids. You just don't have the money. And that's the worst. That's the worst to hear, you know? It crushes you. And like, I remember I told that story to someone on TikTok that was like, yeah, I had a teacher tell me that I should probably just drop out of orchestra because it wasn't worth pursuing anymore. And one of the comments was like, that was so rude, your teacher never should have said that. I was like, I understand where she was coming from, because she's like a 20-something-year-old white woman looking at this little black girl who's like really struggling inside of orchestra at the time. And she sees her struggling, and she's like, well, if you stop doing this now, you can go put your time and energy into something that will pay off for you in the future, you know? But it also wasn't her place to tell me that I couldn't pursue what I enjoyed or what I loved, or something that my parents really wanted me to be able to achieve. And that was very important to see them achieve or see me in. and achieve in, you know? So it's like, that was kind of a struggle, but that's also why I'm very aware of like my presence in the FGC, and why when people are like, well, you don't belong here, I'm like, okay, people have been telling me that my entire life. I don't care. I'm still here. What are you gonna do about it? Nothing, because you're not paying my bills. You're not the reason that this company paid for me to be here. This company paid for me to be here because they saw my skill and they know I happen to be this and I have a really big audience behind me. If you want to be here, do all the stuff I do. You can't? Well, peace. You know? And like, that's where I am with stuff now. So just because someone tells you, you know, you wouldn't have a question about this, or you wouldn't be this, or you wouldn't be that if you really wanted to do it, I think people like that just aren't in our positions. They're usually not people of color. They're usually not in any way, shape, or form female or non-binary or queer, and they usually don't understand what it's like to be inside an environment that's not created for you, because band and orchestra inherently were not created for people of color at all. Right? Like, orchestra was not created by Black people. It's created by a bunch of very, 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 very old, rich European people who wanted something to be able to explore and just unwind with, right? Band was actually created, to be very honest with you, was actually created inside of Africa. Horns did originate from there. That's why we have bronze trumpets, as you know, and a lot of reed-based instruments were created inside of parts of the Middle East, specifically like in Saudi Arabia and Southeast Asia. As you know, that's very basic music history. I'm not going too deep or over your head over here, I assume, right? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
But it was co-opted into something a little bit more European when it was able to then complement orchestral music, right? And used for the grace of God, right? Not to say that, like, as to whether or not music can commune with ultimately the gods or anything like that is a conversation. It's more of like, that's what it was used for, right?
Right.
So when you think about it from that, and you think about how much they tried to clean up the image of who is allowed to create music, what music has to sound like, even music theory is very European centralized. Like, they talk to you about why Baroque is so clean and why it's so smart and why you can play it and your kid will come out incredibly intelligent. If you play rap music, your kid's gonna come out wrong and a gangster. And it's like, no, there is no correlation between that at all. If you play music for your kid, they're going to listen to music and they're going to vibe with music because human beings like music and they got ears and they use a brain and that's what it is. You know? Like, it's what it is. It's marketing. You're being marketed to. I understand the theory behind why music links so well with mathematics, because at its core, as you know, inside of Baroque, it's 1 3 5 7 all the way through. Very, 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 very Fibonacci, you know? But ultimately, there is something missing from a lot of classical music and a lot of non-contemporary music theory, which is the thought process that other cultures developed music that was just as good, if not superior, to European central music. And that was a frustrating thing for me to determine after I started studying more music theory and after I started like taking college level classes and university level classes and even learning on my own. It was a frustrating thing to find out. And it was always something that I really wanted to do and explore more of. And I'm just very honored and very happy that so much of my audience sees my work, especially like my little jingles or whatever, and they're like, you know, I've never really understood why I didn't necessarily like this type of music, but now that Sharpie's voice is here, I can kind of see the appeal. Like, I'll take old classical music and just do a little jingle to it, you know, like El Chocolo, the very famous tango song from Argentina. Like that song, I just did a Project L jingle to it, and people are like, oh, this is nice. But the thing that overwhelmingly happened inside of the comments, of course, was someone was like, I thought she was gonna rap. And I'm like, what about this song made you think I was going to rap? Or did you see me and then think, oh, she's black, here comes the rap music? You know, it's like preconceived notions like that inside of music contribute to a lot of the racial discrimination that we hear inside of music theory and classical music. And I know that's not the dissection you were looking for inside of this interview, but that's the dissection you're going to get.
Yep. I do think that there are like a bunch of very powerful merits to learning to be a musician growing up. It teaches you some very like critical life skills, just being self-disciplined, just putting them out of focus, performing under pressure, especially.
Yes.
How would you say that some of those things have kind of like translated over to you as a content creator, or even in some cases as a competitor?
They stopped me from quitting earlier than I would like to. Because one of the things I struggled with when I was playing violin was vibrato. For those people who don't know what vibrato is, I'm certain you're familiar with it because on horn instruments it's a lot easier. You're just moving a valve up and down. On a string instrument, you literally have to vibrate a string. And depending on the size of your instrument, it's significantly harder because of the strength at which you have to vibrate it. To give an example, on a cello, it's significantly easier to vibrate a string because the string is very, very large. On a bass, it's very easy. On a viola, it's a little bit easier because you have a little bit more room to do it. On a violin, it's very difficult because violins only have 4 sizes. And the largest size doesn't even a violin is actually smaller than my arm. Violins are pretty small instruments. And in order to vibrate them, you have to move your finger very, very quickly in a very static manner without moving it too much so that the pitch of the sound moves, right?
Yep.
But for me, I could never do that because I would need private instruction in order to learn how to do that. When my music teacher in class would come over and help move my finger to do it, and my wrist got looser, it was easier for me to do it. But I did need guidance on how to do it. It wasn't something I was able to learn how to do myself. So that was the point. I reached a wall, and I wasn't able to get past it ever, really. And I remember hitting that wall in 8th grade and being like, oh my God, I just vibratoed, and going through the rest of my day trying to redo it, and I couldn't. And I got so frustrated, I got so upset, and I couldn't do it by myself no matter how long I tried. I tried for literally the next almost 6 years straight. So I got really good at faking vibrato, and doing it on certain strings that weren't as hard to do it on, or bigger instruments, and faking it so that it sounded nice, but it wasn't really ever as good as it could be with vibrato. When I was practicing Skullgirls, like I said before, and I got to the point of tears of not being able to do DP, I ran into that exact same wall that I ran into about not being able to do vibrato. But the person I was learning with at the time walked me through that. I was like, you're not a piece of shit. You're not bad at this game. You're just struggling with something, and that's normal, and that's okay. And you can do this. You can do this. You're okay. You're valid. You're wonderful. You just need to practice a little bit more. We're going to keep practicing, and I'll be here with you every single day to make sure we can do this. And that type of reassurance is something that I didn't get in orchestra.
Right.
As much as I wanted it, and as much as I asked from my teachers, I didn't really get that because that's not something that's always accessible at a public level for a little black girl that doesn't have money for a private teacher, Right.
In music, you have those barriers of entry in just upbringing and in finances, but in the FGC, there's no barrier. There's no barrier to entry. The barrier to entry is the gatekeepers that make you feel like shit for being here, Yep.
It's one of those things that taught me self-discipline. It taught me how to just turn it on when I need to turn it on. How when you're on the stage, it doesn't matter what you left before you were on the stage. You go up there, you perform, you play what you practiced, and you put on that show. Because that's what this audience is here for. That's what they pay the tickets for. You are a part of a team, and it's very important that you do your job in that team.
Yep.
That's what music taught me. Those were the tools I took away from music.
Yep.
I learned expression. I learned how to work together. And I also learned that, there are certain times where the world's just not fair. People are going to be better than you, and all you can do is just help the greater whole sound better. Because if anybody in that greater whole is bad, you are all terrible, you're all bad,
Right.
And that's where I get a lot of my leadership qualities from as well. Oh man, I almost teared up thinking about how shitty some of my orchestra teachers were. Not all of them, I really want to stress that. They weren't all bad towards me. There's just a specific teacher that really hindered the way that I looked at music. And so it made it very, very hard for me to, like, not take it out and not be angry at other kids that had more at me, especially when they were so much more flippant about it. They're like, yeah, I'm good at orchestra, whatever. Sheila, you want to see me do this really advanced tier 1 or tier 3 piece right now? I can do super easy. I'm like, oh, man, that's so cool. You had your parents pay for a private teacher so you could learn earlier than me. That's awesome. Congratulations. You know, like...
So another thing that really interests me about like how you've cultivated your skills as a creator, there was a tweet that you posted, I think a year ago, and I tried my hardest to find it, but searching for tweets on Twitter is always a mess. You posted a photo of a very nice stack of books on improv and comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
To which I eventually reached out and grabbed a few of myself.
Can I just say Truth in Comedy is literally the thing that helped improve my sketches the most of all of those books I read?
It's so good. It's like
Yeah.
the foundation. I read that one first.
Good. I'm so glad. No, there are many very talented improv comedians and general professional comedians who learn from that book. Mike Myers, I think, writes the foreword for that book, right?
No, I don't think. Hang on.
She doesn't? He doesn't?
Let me check.
Austin Powers?
No, yeah, Mike Myers, he's here in the forward.
Yeah. It's a really, really good book. It genuinely unlocked, like, Sharpie in her totality for me. And I have to say, something that I took to do this quarantine was I realized, as I had realized when I was much younger, I used to read all the time. I used to just read anything I could grab and get my hands on. I'm certain you're familiar with that concept, right? Like, you can't read fast enough in order to like literally nourish your brain and scratch that itch you have. And that was my problem when I was younger. I literally couldn't read fast enough. I couldn't do it. I would print out a bunch of pages at my local library from a different series of websites that had information on Python or C++ or HTML. I would look in my local library for different old books on like Arthur Ashe and stuff, just old black athletes just to read about their lives. I would look up a lot of stories about musicians who struggled before and read what they were able to put down before they passed from this world. I would just want to acquire knowledge, and I wanted to acquire it very, very quickly. I read almost all of Shakespeare's work before I graduated in 6th grade from elementary school. Like, it was one of those things where I was reading at like a college level in 7th grade. And that's very present, I feel as though, in a lot of my language today, which resulted in me getting bullied a lot when I was a child. A lot when I was younger than 12. A lot. I was not like cool by any means, by literally any standards whatsoever. I was definitely a nerd.
It's always the people who get bullied.
It's always us. It's because I didn't know how to do my hair. I wasn't like cute in the face. I was a lot bigger. I actually weighed. I was considered overweight when I was younger. I was like, I think I weighed in at like 135 pounds while being like 4'2" or 5 or something when I was like in 4th or 5th grade. Like I was pretty chunky, and I still have the stretch marks, unfortunately. But it's one of those things that never goes away. But it kept me very humble. When puberty finally hit and like all the weight started shedding, like people just started treating me different, and I didn't understand why. Like it no longer mattered what I talked like because I was considered like attractive. And it was weird. But it was also one of those things that like made me realize that I kind of had this whole superpower to like dissect things to a higher level, because there were a lot of very superficial children in my age group that didn't care as much to read or regurgitate knowledge, because like my parents wouldn't let us watch TV. We had to read. It was all we were able to do. Like I wanted to be able to read. In fact, I got frustrated in the car when I couldn't read because I would get motion sick. You know, like it was frustrating to me. I was like, I want to read. And they're like, Sheila, you can't read. You're going to throw up. You know, like you can't do it. It's not allowed.
Right.
It's one of those things that I take for granted now, being able to understand how to consume knowledge and being able to understand how to educate myself by myself just through the power of reading books and being able to receive that information through that medium. So this
Right.
past quarantine, when I wanted to start experimenting, getting better with sketch comedy and enhancing some of my content, I just kind of went on a bender and started looking for books, not audio books, like actual physical media. Because
Yep.
the thing that people don't tell you, that I obviously know, and you probably know because you're very well read yourself, is that some of the best books don't exist in video or in audio format. They're just books. Somebody literally took the time to write out or to type out something. One of
Yep.
my favorite people to read when I was growing up, when I was coming of age in middle school, was Langston Hughes. Literally, I loved reading his work. I loved reading his short novels and short poems, and I would love to try to dissect the motions and the movement that he was trying to convey in his text, almost like it was a cipher of a type. You know, I read the Da Vinci Code in 9th grade, and I still remember like sleeping next to a Bible because I was so worried. I remember reading Harry Potter in like 7th grade, reading the 4th book of Harry Potter and also sleeping with the Bible because I was so scared. I used to really read, and I got back to it this quarantine in order to kind of elevate my skills because I didn't have anyone else here, and I knew that the video medium wouldn't be enough to teach me the skills to the level that I would need to be at. So I wanted to start showcasing to my following, you all should be reading. You're reading my shit posts. You're reading my text messages that I'm putting out here. You're reading the subtext on these videos. You should be educating yourself through text, because for a very long period of time, that was knowledge that was considered so powerful that they wouldn't allow slaves to do it, because they understood that it would unlock knowledge. And at this point now, it's literally freely available to us, and we're choosing not to do it from our own ignorance. We're choosing to be swayed by popular culture instead of educating ourselves on what we can do better. I'm not going to sit here and say you can't enjoy Doja Cat or Meg the Stallion.
Right.
What I'm saying is, if you don't understand Langston Hughes, or you don't understand I'm blanking on a famous writer. Her name is Nora, and I don't remember her last name right now off the top of my head.
Oh,
You know who I'm talking about, the journalist.
yeah. Trying to think.
If you haven't read their work, then how can you say you truly know your history, right?
Right.
So it's just one of those things that you have to be 100% and completely like truthful about. Like when I learn a skill, and when people are like, oh, you're just good at everything, I was like, I am working very hard at expanding my knowledge, even though I'm outside of school. In fact, I'm considering going back to school right now just to expand it some more. I actually took community college courses for AV and production, and I took a couple of public speaking classes at my local community college just to help me in my broadcasting and general commentating. It's not as useful as you would think, but it has definitely helped. It has
There are
definitely
applications.
helped. Yes, for sure.
When I entered college, I entered like a really like deep like self-help like rabbit hole of like
Yeah.
nonfiction books, and then that like led to psychology, it led to business, it led to sales. It even led to like me eventually reading this book, Charles Duhigg's Power of Habit, which really like informed the style of content I make on this channel.
Yeah, I believe that.
There was a video I made, I think it's 2 years ago, just dissecting how habit formation can apply to fighting games.
Yep.
And that was like one of like the first more discussion oriented videos that I had done on my channel, and it was received incredibly well. And what really kind of motivated me to really make that particular video is a series that Sajam had made like years ago about like some of the barriers that you kind of have mentally whenever it comes to making content. At the core of it, it's just like make something reflective of what you enjoy, and then
Yep.
people will resonate with it.
Of course, because like the reality of it is, if you resonate with it, there are people like you who will also resonate with it. And that's a very
Right.
strong message, not just inside of our community, but inside of other communities. And like, to give somewhat of a negative example, that's the same strategy that the alt-right used to push Gamergate into the forefront, right?
Yep.
They had a
Yep.
very loud, incorrect thought that resonated with a lot of people who ultimately felt very similar to it, you know?
Right.
And so it's like people will respond to an emotion that they feel very strongly about, especially if they feel like it's true. And so if you are just yourself and you know that you are organically being yourself, people like you will find you because you know yourself. And when you
Right.
know yourself, you're significantly stronger than trying to emulate anybody, especially a grappler who can literally armor their way across the entire screen for no reason, with literally no setbacks, and 100 to death you in one touch. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes, of course, of course. Once again, thank you, Sharpie, for coming out. I really appreciate everything that you do for the community. I appreciate the message that you're trying to promote, and I appreciate the impact that you really bring, not only just in the fighting game community, but also outside of it as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on a show like this, and I really appreciate the time that you took to not only make me feel welcome, but also make me feel respected inside of this space. Have a great one.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.